Well, good morning. Today's our Tuesday Talent Series. It's March 5th, 2024. We're so excited that you're with us today. We have a wonderful presentation from Jessie Ollier, a certified sales and leadership coach. Her session today is navigating the new era of buyer-centric sales, strategies to close more deals. We're super excited about our sponsor. The sponsor of our Tuesday Talent Series is Plante Moran. Plante Moran is among the nation's largest accounting, tax, consulting, and wealth management firms and provides a full line of services to organizations in the following industries: manufacturing and distribution, financial services, service, healthcare, private equity, public sector, real estate, construction, and energy. This year, they are proudly celebrating 100 years. Plante Moran is a staff of more than 3,300 professionals throughout the United States, with international offices in Shanghai, China, Mumbai, India, Tokyo, Japan, and Monterrey, Mexico. In Colorado, Plante Moran has served its Colorado clients for more than 40 years, with offices in Broomfield, Denver, and Fort Collins. Plante Moran has been recognized by a number of organizations, including Fortune magazine, as one of the country's best places to work. For more information, visit plantemoran.com. And now a little bit about Jessie. Jessie is a seasoned professional with 18 years of experience in sales and sales leadership. As a certified sales and leadership coach, as well as a certified high-performance coach, she brings a unique perspective to sales growth. Jessie is the founder of two successful companies, Wellutations, a corporate well-being company, and Aligned Prosperity, a sales and confidence coaching company. Her expertise lies in teaching customer-centric sales strategies and high-performance habits that boost confidence and elevates one's professional identity. Having driven significant revenue and coached numerous sales professionals and entrepreneurs, Jessie understands the evolving landscape of sales. She recognizes the critical importance of aligning strategy with today's market dynamics. Beyond honing skills, Jessie's approach delves deep into the inner game, addressing fears, limiting thought patterns, and fostering unwavering confidence. Her mission is to guide individuals to real breakthroughs and lasting success in sales. So Jessie, we're excited you're here, and I'll stop sharing and let you put up your slides.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Let me get this set up quick. Oops. I think I lost my presentation here. Let me open this back up. Share. All right. Are you seeing my presentation there?
Nope, we're seeing your desktop at this point.
Oh no. Okay. What happened here? Sorry, it moved away from me. Okay, now let me try to reshare. I'm not sure why my presentation moved. You're still seeing my desktop, right?
Yep. Well, we're seeing a bunch of slides now.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can open it down here. Now are you seeing it?
Yes. Perfect.
Yay. Okay. Technology is not why people hire me. It's not why people work with me. That's for sure. So thank you so much. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. Just a little bit more about what I do. My goal is really to help people in the world of sales, whether it's entrepreneurs or sales professionals, understand how to shift from hours worked being sort of the X factor of their success to energy being the success factor to their success. And by energy, what I mean is confidence combined with buyer-centric strategies that help the buyer move themselves down the funnel instead of it being heavy persuasion and influence by the salesperson. So when people make these shifts, and I've seen it through my personal career, the individuals I've led as a sales leader, but also those I've coached, you experience quantum leaps without the sacrifice of life and the time that you want to spend with it. So my goal today is to provide some really clear strategies that I coached other individuals on to experience the same type of outcome. Some of the things that we're going to cover are just initially kind of understanding how the modern buyer buys, pitfalls to the typical sales practice and kind of older sales strategies, which are more product-centric selling strategies, the power of shifting them to problem-centric selling, which when I say customer-centric and problem-centric are not exactly one and the same, but really similar. Customer-centric is obviously focused on what matters to the buyer, what matters to the customer, what are they trying to achieve, what's holding them back. Problem-centric is then finding out what's holding them back and really hyper narrowing in on the specific root causes of that problem and how it's affecting their goals across kind of a bigger landscape. So we'll dig in a little bit more on that, but the power of problem-centric selling, making the shift. So understanding your buyer, and then what does the strategy actually look like for transitioning from maybe a transactional sales process that is product-centric to being more customer-centric, mastering the art of consultative selling, and then if we have time, some live coaching. So to kick off, modern buyers, obviously, I think we all know this with the internet and just the abundance of information available to us at, the click of a button. They are well-informed, they are seeking value, and they're seeking solutions to problems. So in the past, we've sort of focused our sales process around buyers wanting to elevate their current situation. So for instance, they want something to be, a certain level better than it is currently. The reality now is that buyers are seeing that type of process as a luxury versus a necessity. And so we want to adjust our sales process to align with what are the problems that they need to overcome that are necessities to them overcoming, and so that they can move towards goals. So the buying criteria of a modern buyer is, without question, value for the money. These other pieces fall under and connect directly to value for the money. So an expansion of that idea is savings and efficiencies. How is this going to save me money now? How is it going to create efficiencies that save me time and money in the future? Necessity over desire. People right now in the current economy are not looking for luxuries. They're not necessarily investing in things that make, like I said, the situation a little bit better. They want to see something as not, it would be nice to have this new experience, but instead it's, without this change, we have significant initiatives and goals that we're trying to accomplish that we cannot get to without a problem being solved. The other piece is intangible value, flexibility and scalability. So they want something that they invest in today not to be sort of a momentary or a today's value. They want it to be something that down the road grows with them and they continue to experience benefit from. The other thing with flexibility is most modern buyers are not looking for really long extended contracts. They're not looking for, a 3-5 year investment or contract to a specific product or service. They want an experience of trying something out and being sold into the next level or the continued service through that experience, but not necessarily on the very front end. So we need to take all of these concepts into account when we're thinking through, what does my sales process look like? So the pitfalls of product-centric, which again, most sales strategies and older sort of traditional sales strategies are product-centric. They rely heavily on presentation and typically have a really short discovery process. The discovery process is often focused on qualifying a prospect for the product or service versus really digging in and uncovering what's going on with the prospect. So the pitfalls are, it decreases differentiation. It almost turns your product and service into a commodity, and which naturally increases competition. This also increases price sensitivity. When you are product centric and you're not focused on solving a problem, but you're focused on selling a product, you are basically causing the client to evaluate the value of your product simply based on price. Can I afford this? Not what am I getting for the price? So increases price sensitivity. Product evaluation is seen as, do I need a luxury? You typically experience longer sales cycles and more follow-up. There's significant missed opportunities with top of funnel prospects because product-centric selling usually works for people who are at the bottom of the funnel only. So you're not going to be able to build your pipeline because the people who you're talking to who are still at the top of the funnel are going to sort of feel like, well, if I'm not ready to move forward right now, the response is basically saying no. And so they're dropping out of the funnel instead of continuing to move down the funnel. Potential misalignment with customer needs. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. You talk prospects out of buying. I'll talk about that one as well. Difficulty building strong relationships, decreased deal size, and limited scopes of perceived value. So the potential misalignment with customer needs. Most products or services might have, say, 10 different reasons that a customer should buy. There are 10 high value, great reasons a customer should invest in the product or service. The reality is that most prospects or most buyers are currently in position to only invest in about 2 of those reasons. So if you are product selling and you're not asking enough questions to understand the real need of the customer, the reality is that you're presenting features and benefits from your best guess of what is going to be attractive to this prospect. And if there are only 2 out of 10 that they would really invest in, you have an 80% chance of getting it wrong and losing the sale, and a 20% chance of getting it right. So the other piece is, the next one was talking prospects out of buying. Typically what happens when we're not focused on what truly matters to a client and we're sort of presenting everything, what we're actually doing is we're teaching the prospect that making a decision on this product requires research. There's so much information that we're feeding them, that we're teaching them. There's a lot of things to evaluate. There's a lot of things to take time to consider. There's probably additional research they need to do. We're teaching them that making a decision to buy is complex and should require time. The other thing that we often teach them is that if they have 2 things, 2 out of 10, that they're actually willing to invest in, but we're showing them all 10 features and benefits of our product, what we're often teaching them is that our product is too robust for their need, that they're investing in far more than they actually need, which makes them view pricing then as, could I find something that is less expensive and only covers the things that for me right now are relevant? So what we're doing is we're teaching them to have the too robust objection. What this ends up doing is it increases follow-up need and it results in lost deals. So shifting over to problem-centric sales methodology. Problem-centric selling focuses on identifying and solving customers' specific problems or pain points rather than leading with the product or service features. And part of what I will sort of preface with this is that an important piece to understand with selling is that every technical strategy has an emotional component to it. And that is where I think most salespeople get thrown off. They might learn amazing strategies, amazing techniques, but then they have this internal system that says, this piece is really uncomfortable for me. I'm not comfortable with asking this, saying this, leading with this type of approach. And so they end up going to the process that they're most familiar with. So when you're making a shift like this, you need to ask yourself, do I understand the technique? But also, do I have some internal resistance to taking action on this technique? And what I would say the most common internal resistance with this type of process is that many people in the world of sales believe that the presentation, the level or quality of their presentation is what closes the deal, is what sells the product. And so they are really well studied, really well practiced on their presentation. And that's where their confidence lies. There's also a belief system that I should be able to answer every question that my prospect asks me. And the reality is that if you are moving into problem-centric, you are going to be asking a lot of questions before you're selling. And that means you can run into a situation where you ask a prospect a question, they respond, and maybe they respond with something you're not familiar with. What happens in those types of scenarios is people get uncomfortable and then they shift directly into presenting because we're familiar with and comfortable with our presentation, our product features. So we're naturally going to go there as quickly as we can. So part of the emotional component with this piece is learning to get comfortable asking questions and not feeling the pressure to, when you get a response from a prospect, adding to it. If I ask a prospect a question, like, what's the biggest challenge you have in this specific area of your business? And they give me an answer, I don't need to add to their answer. I need to capture the information from their answer. But because most salespeople feel this sense of, I need to always be able to show a prospect that I understand what they said by adding to it, they will avoid asking questions where they feel like they're not an expert in that area. That's the emotional component that's going to enable you to actually dive into this. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so the power of problem-centric selling. Problem-centric selling increases relevance and engagement. When you are designing your conversation around what a prospect is experiencing that is causing them to miss out on opportunities, that is causing them to miss out on sleep because of stress, whatever it is that their problem is, when your conversation is hyper relevant to the things that matter to them, they are so much more engaged in the conversation, meaning they're going to give you so much more detail about their scenario. And as they're engaging and speaking to relevant pieces of their business, they're actually selling themselves and moving themselves down the funnel. So increased relevance and engagement, accelerated trust and credibility, shortened sales cycle, higher conversion rates, improved customer satisfaction and loyalty, differentiation from competitors. This is a huge one. I'll talk a little bit more about this. Upselling and cross-selling opportunities. The more you learn about your customer, the more likely it is that if you initially think, I have this single package I'm going to sell them, but I learn all this additional information about their business, the more likely it is to say, it makes sense for us to bring this other piece in and at least discuss it. It sounds like from what you shared with me, this other part of what we offer would be really relevant and a key tool in getting you across the finish line and bringing in cross-selling and upselling opportunities, which naturally then leads to increased deal sizes, increased referral generation. When you are differentiating by the scope of your service at the very front of the relationship, so in the sales process, you are far more likely to receive organic referrals from a prospect, whether they work with you or not. Decreased price orientation. And I'm going to show you this in detail, but when a prospect is thinking through the process of buying by problem-centric strategies, they are less focused on price and budget and more focused on value. So when it comes to pricing negotiation, that process becomes much easier. You're aligned with customers at any funnel stage, and ultimately that allows you to build pipeline. What happens for most salespeople is that they're really good at working with people at one stage of the funnel. Anybody else kind of gets lost. And they don't know how to qualify based on their conversation when they're having with them, whether they're at the top of the funnel and need a specific follow-up strategy, they're in the middle of the funnel and have already made sort of a problem awareness decision, but are deciding on maybe the right vendor to work with, or if they're further down and they're like ready to take action. They don't know. What they're typically doing is qualifying technically, like, are you a fit as a customer, period, versus are you a fit as a customer and where are you in your buying process? So I know how to work you through the funnel. This strategy will allow you to do that. All right. So how do the selling processes differentiate? So problem-centric, like I mentioned, it's feature focused. It's focused on features, benefits. It's really a standardized approach. It's typically, I learn my product features and benefits. I learn how to present it. I lead the conversation with a discovery that is hyper qualifying questions, also technical fit driven. And then I take you through the same presentation I will give to the next 100 customers I talk to. It's very dependent on the quality of closing strategies. It requires a higher level of real like persuasion and influence, because instead of giving information and allowing a prospect to follow you, you're actually really having to persuade and push a client into the sale. It feels a lot more salesy, which sometimes, people enjoy. Most people in the world of sales, I think, heavily avoid the sense of feeling pushy. And ultimately, that's why sometimes their process leads to a lot of follow-up, because they give a lot of information. They have a hard time closing the actual deal. This selling process ends up being really pricing, usually discount and deal oriented. Usually the closing strategy for product-centric selling is discounting and putting a limitation around the discount. So for the next 30 days, this is your pricing. After that, it'll go up by a certain percentage. And you're trying to create urgency with discounting because you don't have relevant value that is tailored to the customer to create a timeline around instead, or urgency around instead. This process is often really transactional. So problem-centric is going to be solution-oriented. The presentation, once you uncover through the discovery all of the customer needs and do a full assessment, your presentation should be hyper-tailored to deliver on all of the things and only the things that the customer has expressed need around. All of the other stuff they can learn later. Closing in problem-centric selling actually occurs in the discovery. And the reality is that when you do a really powerful discovery, what happens is your customer ends up saying, tell me how we work together. What's the next step that we need to take to get this going? And the truth is that most of the time you don't even need to be really good at closing strategies. So that is sort of, that piece is kind of out the window. These deals usually end up being full price deals. They don't require discounting. They don't require creating heavy levels of price-oriented urgency to get people to stick to a timeline and close. And ultimately, they're consultative and relationship focused. So let me give you an example of how a prospect would evaluate the price of a product when they are product-centric, in a product-centric sales process, or problem-centric. It's getting really hard to say those two. Okay, so say we have a product that's $10,000 and the product is positioned as, because we're in product-centric and we haven't really uncovered a deep need for the client, we're presenting it basically as, this would be nice to have. This would elevate your current experience in some way. So it's positioned as a nice to have, kind of as a luxury. The buyer is basing their decision on price and the budget, like the current established budget for non-necessities, right? The value of the product is going to be benefit of presented features. So whatever they think this elevated experience might be worth is the opportunity cost they're thinking through in their head. You may or may not, you're likely not in the know of that. And so what they're thinking is, okay, the product costs $10,000. And what I'm going to get is this, XYZ sort of elevated experience. That's how they're evaluating. They're almost always going to ask you for a discount if they even feel compelled to move forward. When you're in a problem-centric methodology, what happens is the product is positioned as a solution to existing impactful problems that the buyer is experiencing. And the idea is uncovering these problems are creating friction or resistance to what? So if I have problems W, Y, X, Z, and those things, overcoming those things are necessary for enabling a key goal, a business initiative, a life initiative, whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And when those things are out of the way, I will be able to move forward on this initiative and experience 15% growth. That's what you're uncovering in problem-centric methodologies. Now what's happening is the value of the product or service is the resolution of W, X, Y, Z plus 15% growth. So you can take $10,000 divided by 4, add 15% times revenue. And the way that your customer is now evaluating cost is $2,500 per unit of change minus 15% growth. when your customer evaluates your product or service in this way, what typically happens is if it's a good product, a good service, it's paying for itself. It's easy to position pricing against this value and show almost like a net. They're investing to achieve equal or greater value than the cost. And it becomes a no-brainer to move forward without having to negotiate pricing, negotiate terms, discount, that type of thing. So now we'll talk about how do you do this, right? How do you get to where you can actually take a client through or prospect through an experience of having them see your pricing that way or having them see the value to pricing that way? So the first thing that you need to do, and I do this with clients over and over, and it is rare that they can make it all the way through this process from their current thinking. So the first thing you need to do in your process is you need to clarify the problems and impact your service or product solves for. So the first thing you want to do is you can create like a spreadsheet like this, and you want to list out as many problems as your product or service solves for. What are all of them? Then what you want to ask yourself for each individual problem is, what does that mean to my prospect? And you want to do this times 3. So let's say, for instance, me as a sales coach, I help people improve their sales strategies. Okay, the problem that most of my clients have is maybe they have leads, but they're struggling to take them across the finish line. Maybe they consistently find themselves in a situation of a lot of follow-up and chasing opportunities, chasing prospects. So the problem is they don't have an effective strategy that's working for them to close a prospect. So what does that mean for them? It means that they're struggling to achieve a level of revenue that is appropriate for hitting their revenue goals, right? What does not hitting revenue goals mean? So I'm asking myself a second time around the first answer that I got. So for one of my clients, not achieving revenue might mean having a second job. It might mean not being able to reinvest in their business. For many of them, because I work with entrepreneurs, what it means is their business that they want to be their full-time life is still a side gig. Like they're still working a full-time corporate job and not able to move into the thing that they want to do full-time. So what does that mean for them? It means stress on family life. It means stress on time. It means overwhelm and burnout. So I start with an initial problem, ask myself, what does that mean to my prospect? Whatever that answer is, I ask, what does that mean to my prospect? What does that mean to my prospect? And you should have a list of 5 problems that you fully understand, at least 3 layers deep, what that problem truly means to your prospect. That is the first piece of understanding how to truly sell to a problem instead of just selling the features and benefits of a product. So highly recommend that exercise. It is the first thing I would have any client do, and it transforms the ability to have a powerful conversation with a prospect. So what to uncover in, nope, I didn't skip something. Okay, so what to uncover in a discovery process. Like I mentioned, in the problem-centric selling methodology, your discovery process is where the entire sale happens. So the likelihood of eliminating objections, of sort of navigating and eliminating the idea of having to have a really complicated pricing conversation, eliminating the need to really have, you want to have an effective closing strategy in place, but the reality is that the more powerful your discovery is, the less often you're even going to use that strategy, because closing becomes really organic and it becomes a collaboration between the sales professional and the prospect, instead of something that the sales professional is sort of doing to the prospect. So key things for developing a discovery process that gets you there is you need to uncover the current state of your prospect. So what are the things that they're currently experiencing in their life or business? What is the desired state? Where do they want to go? What do they want it to look like? What processes, systems, outcomes do they want to be experiencing? So you're creating sort of a line graph here. Current state, desired state. Now you want to uncover what are the things that exist in the gap. If they were to close the gap, what needs to be removed? What needs to be eliminated? What needs to be sort of shifted or altered? So uncovering the obstacles to closing the gap. The next piece is we need to understand what's the cost of inaction. If they stay in their current state, which for most people in the world of sales, the greatest competitor that you have in your success is not another company, it's status quo. People love the familiar, and they are far more likely to stick with a current challenge and just say, I accept it as a, inconvenience, but part of, life, than they are to sort of overcome it if they don't really understand the cost of not overcoming it. So what is the cost of inaction? What's the cost of continuing in their current status quo? What's the gain of action? In my previous example, I showed 15% growth. They have a system in place where if they were able to enable it, if they were able to push the button and start it immediately, they have measured that they would receive 15% growth in revenue. That would be the gain of action, right? And any other initiatives that their obstacles to closing the gap are creating resistance in, are obstacles for. So gain of action, then goals dependent on obstacle resolution. So just what I mentioned. The last piece, and this is, most people keep this out or don't put this in their discovery process, and it is so important, is you need to uncover the factors driving their current thinking. And what you're going to find is that some of the factors driving their thinking make sense. They're accurate. They're how you would think through something. Because you're an expert in whatever it is that you're selling, you are going to naturally have a higher level of understanding of how to make a decision in this arena, right? You're going to be able to spot some misconceptions in their thinking, some, common belief systems that are misconceptions, some thinking patterns that are driven from or originated from false information, maybe, societal norms, but things that aren't fact, they're just realities because they're sort of creating them for themselves. Your goal is to make sure that your discovery process delivers high value to the prospect. And this is another reason that most people in the world of sales shift to their presentation really quickly, far too early, is that most people in the world of sales think that the discovery is for the salesperson and the presentation is for the buyer. And because they feel like they need to make the buyer happy quickly, they want to jump into the presentation and start showing them lots of stuff. The reality is that the greatest value you can deliver to a prospect in the discovery process or the front end of your sales process is by helping them to understand a new way of thinking and thinking for decision-making around the problem they're experiencing. If you can teach them something more or a better way of looking at or understanding their current problem, the value that you've delivered is far beyond anything you're going to show them in a presentation. So this is critical. This last factor is all of these pieces are critical for your discovery, but don't forget this one. It helps you to deliver true value in your discovery process, but it's also going to help you leverage, create urgency later. It's going to help you ask for referrals later. There are multiple different parts of the sales process that it can come back into play. So differentiating with problem-centric selling. There are not many industries right now that are not, I don't know if I want to call it saturated, but we certainly have competition across the board in nearly every industry. So part of what we need to be really intentional about doing is looking at our sales process is an abbreviated experience of working with us. So the way I experience your sales process is the way I'm going to assume being your customer is going to look. Most salespeople are not conscious of this. They're also not conscious of the fact that your sales process is one of the best ways that you can differentiate especially if your product doesn't hyper differentiate. If it's something that the next person can replicate, the next person can be pretty similar to or deliver pretty similar to. So you need to ask yourself, does your selling process demonstrate customer focus or transaction focus? That will be one of the first key differentiators, because 90% of salespeople are transactional and product focused. They meet with a customer, they ask a couple of qualifying questions, and they immediately start telling them how they can solve their problems and showing their product or service. The selling process shift alone is a huge differentiator. The next thing is your discovery providing value? Are you providing value by helping your prospect better understand their problem? And again, this on the front end, if you have a prospect who is talking to you and then has a meeting with another provider scheduled for another day. As a coach, I hear this often. I'm meeting with you, but I'm also interviewing 2 other coaches in the next week. I have absolutely no problem with that. What I know almost with full certainty is that the experience of going through my selling process will differentiate me so drastically that it doesn't matter what the other coaches say, they're going to have a really hard time comparing me to the other coaches. That is a significant piece of you making sure that your entire sales process is customer centric, but also that you are ahead of the other options that are out there, especially, like I said, if your product doesn't vary a lot. So mastering the art of consultative selling. And I know I'm going fast. Most of these things I would break down, and individually it would be like a coaching session on one of these slides or maybe 2 of these slides, and getting really deep and tailoring those processes to a specific customer, how they sell, the language that they like to use in their selling process, the customers that they work with, the product that they sell. So this is, overview. There's more work to do with this, but if you take each of these slides and you give yourself permission to pause and say, how can I make sense of this one for me and tailor it for me? This process will be incredibly powerful for you. So I apologize, I'm going fast. I just want to make sure I give you kind of a comprehensive process so that you can kind of have something in its entirety to tailor for yourself. So, all right, designing a discovery around the problems, impacts, and states that you uncover. So like I mentioned previously, we are uncovering the prospect's current state, their desired state, the obstacles that are creating the separation between the two, everything that lives in here. So those are the problems. The impacts are the extended, the ripple effect of the problems, right? So when I showed you the chart and it was list the problem and then list what does this mean to my prospect, you want to ahead of time have an idea of what those things might be, which is why you go through that exercise of asking yourself 3 times, what does this mean to them? It's going to help you better understand the impacts and be ahead of this conversation. But you also don't want to be presenting those to the prospect. Through your discovery, you're asking questions to pull that out from them. So, sorry, let me move this really quick. So you're going to then think, this is what I understand about my prospect. This is the problem that I solve. This is the conversation I want to have with them. I want to talk about their current situation, their desired situation, the things that are getting in the way of them getting there. I want to understand the thinking that has driven their current evaluation process of making this investment. So how do I design discovery process that would help me take a prospect through understanding this, right? So you can ask questions like, and here's another piece that I want you to really understand is that some people in sales want a word for word script. Tell me exactly how to say it and what to do, and I'll just do it. And that's fine. Other people want total freedom because they want to feel fully their authentic self inside the process. And that makes sense too. But here's the thing to really understand is that structure creates freedom. Lack of structure does not create freedom. It creates fear. So if you're someone who likes to kind of wing it and you like to have flexibility and you like to be sort of guided by the customer and have a really organic conversation, what often is going to happen is that you're probably not driving to your goal. You're probably finding yourself at the end of a conversation. Maybe you had an incredible conversation, but it went all over the place. And you actually haven't covered what's necessary for you to ask for the right next step. So instead of that, you make up a lesser next step and you find yourself in the sales cycle that is incredibly long. So you might have a great relationship, but you're not closing anybody. So structure creates freedom. Lack of structure creates fear. It creates a sense of like, okay, I haven't really gotten where I need to be, so I can't ask for the right thing. The other side, word for word scripting, can sometimes inhibit flexibility. So what I highly recommend, and I've seen be hyper successful for, the hundreds of people I've worked with in the world of sales, is you need to have a really clear, maybe word for word structure, and you know it so well that you're able to follow the customer, go over here, have a relevant discussion for them, but then bring it back. The roadmap is so clear that you can always come back, but you can also be organic and meet them where they are and then come back. So right now, if you're running a discovery process without really clear questions that guide an intentional process, like current state, desired state, obstacles, that type of thing, I promise you your sales cycle is longer than it needs to be, and you're not closing prospects that you could be closing. So you need to look at, how do I create questions from that format? And some of the most powerful ways to get people to open up and go deep on questions is it's the way you design your questions. So for instance, help me understand. Can you help me understand? Sorry, I didn't mean to double that up. Can you walk me through? Can you share the thinking that drove your decision? Can you explain to me the key factors that drove you to arrive at this being your buying criteria? What are the things that are most important to you for the next year? You need to create really intentional questions. And so the first thing I would do is write out current, desired, obstacles, and the other key points on the previous slide, and write questions underneath each one of them so that you know that you're asking questions that are guiding a decision maker through this process. The next thing is, when you get an answer from a question that you ask a prospect, you have to help them expand on the impact by asking second degree questions. And this is what I'd say 90% of salespeople miss this. They hear a response from a prospect and they usually start selling to that response. Or if they don't start selling, then they just go to the next question that they have in their discovery process. And what you're going to find is that most people have challenges that they, have been dealing with forever, and they've just accepted as part of doing business. And so they'll tell you the problem, but because they haven't gone deep enough on their own, they're not actually going to invest in overcoming the problem because they've just accepted it. You need to help them go deeper by, when they share a problem with you, you say, that's interesting. Where else does that show up for you? What friction does that create in other departments of the business or in other initiatives that you have for yourself, other goals that you have? Interesting. How so? So create a list of second degree questions that you can tack onto the format, and be really intentional in sort of making a rule for yourself that I don't ask another discovery question until I've asked the second degree question. By doing that, you will teach your prospect to go deeper on the problems that they have and see them from another perspective that they probably haven't already evaluated them at. Okay, so the next key for problem-centric selling is learning to master storytelling. The power of storytelling, and there's lots of them, but stories help your prospects include themselves. So what happens often is you could have an amazing product, an amazing service, and there's some thinking inside a prospect that is causing them to say, that sounds amazing, but there's something unique about my scenario that makes that not really be a fit for me. And maybe it's that they're thinking you work with customers who are bigger than them. A story of you working with a big customer and a small customer includes them. It causes them to say, oh, me too, right? Oh, this includes me as well. So Stories cause people to eliminate this sort of exclusion of themselves and bring themselves in as this service could be relevant for me. The other thing is it helps them dream beyond their status quo. Most of the time, prospects can have a hard time either dreaming of their goal being bigger than what it's been. So it's like every year I grow 5% or 10%. They might have a really hard time thinking with your product, I could grow 25% just by you telling them. But if you share an experience of another customer like them who grew 25%, it allows their ability to dream to expand. The other place where they sometimes have limited thinking or dreaming is within systems. I can dream big about where I want to go, but I can't imagine my day-to-day operations or systems being much different than they already are. So when I'm thinking about what I need in a different system, it's probably really limited. So stories can help them understand or sort of tap into the ability to dream bigger. And again, that's part of like living into the solution. The other thing that it does is when you're telling stories about customers like them who have used your solution, started with an initial problem that they relate to, had a clear shift in process that they can kind of live into and understand and see for themselves, and then had a powerful outcome, you are drastically accelerating rapport and credibility. And that will very much impact the length and shortening of your sales cycle. So this is a process for how to write a story. I have seen a lot of sort of formats for how customers, or I've heard people share stories, and usually they're not comprehensive enough. So this is a format that you can use to write out a story. So the first thing you want to do is think, a previous client I've had, what was their initial thinking? What was driving their decision-making process when they were evaluating making a change or achieving a goal or investing in something, a product? What were they initially thinking? How were they thinking through it? What were the new insights that I was able to provide them that helped them think differently or deeper or from a new perspective about making this decision? How did that new thinking influence them to take action? And then what was the positive outcome? So that's a if you're getting objections of like, I'm not ready yet, or I don't think this is a fit for me, that's a great structure for a story. And you can take that and put it all together and create a success story. Another way to create a story is actually more focused on results. So it could be initially a client was their process looked like this. Their strategy looked like this. We were able to help them understand a new direction to go, new steps to take, which were these. They took these actions and this was the result. That's more of a results-oriented story structure, but you need to include each of these. Most people leave off the original. Like, how are they originally operating? In making this process inclusive of all these points is how you help people take them through take themselves through the experience of, wow, that's me right now. I could see that for myself, that shift. They got that outcome. If I'm including myself, if they got it, I could get it. And you're helping them to see working with you in a completely different way. So vital that you're using storytelling. Here's kind of the last secret to discovery. And I'm happy to provide some actual word for word scripting on this. But the real secret that comes ahead of what we've already talked about with discovery is, if you're going to ask a prospect to go deep with you, to share the challenges that they're experiencing, the greater impact of those challenges, to really go deep and sort of dream with you and think with you and uncover with you and explore with you, there's a relationship that needs to be established for someone to go that way with you. And the best thing that you can do is create a buying environment, create sort of a discovery environment. And keeping in mind that most people in a sales process are thinking, okay, my job is to close this deal, which is the end sale, right? The reality is that every selling process has multiple sales in it. You're selling multiple times for small commitments before you get to the final close. Your very first sale is for an open conversation. And most people completely skip this sales process. They go into discovery, they ask questions, they get really short, maybe yes or no answers, and they really find themselves in a position to go into presentation not knowing that much about their prospect. and the prospect not knowing much more about themselves than they did before they talked to you. So your first sale is an open conversation. And while it sounds counterintuitive, the best way or most powerful way to establish this discovery environment is to tell a prospect it's okay to say no. So it is incredibly powerful to say to a prospect, hey, my goal is to do the best that I can to understand what it is that you're looking to accomplish, and any of the things that we would possibly play a role in or could possibly play a role in removing or solving for you so that you can get there. To do that, I want to ask you a lot of questions, but I also want to tell you that if at any point in our discussion, you're getting a sense that this is not a fit, please feel free to interrupt me and share that with me. If it is a fit, amazing. We can talk about what it would look like for us to go to the next step. Or if it is a fit, amazing. I'll be happy to share with you then kind of what our product looks like, what our service looks like. So you're letting people know it's okay to say yes. It's also okay to say no. And the reality is that sort of essence alone will create a far deeper discovery process and will instantly accelerate, again, rapport and credibility with a prospect, especially if you're talking to a guarded prospect who is many prospects will go through the entire experiencing, protecting themselves from being sold instead of engaging and going deep to explore if it makes sense, if it's a fit or not. So super powerful. All right. The next piece is then you go into a micro presentation. And the reality is that the best thing you can do here is instead of presenting on your product, you want to present on new thinking. So from what you've learned in discovery, you should have uncovered some version of misconception that is driving their thinking, of thinking that maybe is limiting, and there's far greater potential for them if they had this new piece of knowledge. Your first presentation to them is not on your product. It's on them understanding something that they don't currently understand. So for instance, when I'm doing discovery with someone and I'm asking them how they think about the sales process, what they think their challenges are, where they want to go, what they want to change, what I often hear from salespeople is, I need to learn how to overcome budget constraints. People, have a budget that's far lower than my cost, and I need to learn how to overcome that objection. I need to become better at presenting pricing and closing. The reality is that the majority of the time, like 98% of the time that those things are relevant issues in a sales cycle, it's not those strategies that need work. It's the discovery process. Because the reality is that the misconception is that the deals are being lost due to lack of budget, poor pricing negotiation, or lack of closing strategy. The reality is that deals are being lost because of low perceived value of the product and service, because the prospect is not connected enough to what they would get by investing this. The truth is that when a prospect has high perceived value, they will find the money. They'll find the budget. Budget is almost never a true constraint. But if your discovery isn't good, you're going to focus on overcoming the budget objection, and you're just going to continue sort of fighting the same battle. So the prospect doesn't understand the expanded impact of your solution. They're evaluating your price without clear opportunity cost. A powerful strategic discovery will minimize, if not eliminate, all of those things. My first presentation in a sales process would be this, not my service. This alone often causes people to say, how do I work with you? What's the next step? Because there's this, oh my gosh, I not only do I need the service, but I need to understand where I'm thinking wrong. Your prospects will have the same experience. So your first sale is an open conversation. Your first presentation is on new thinking. Okay. So at this point, if we had more time, I would go into live coaching and let you ask me anything. Since we don't have time, what I will welcome is my email is jessie@jessieollier.com. If you would like, feel free to send questions to me, and I will do my best to help you tailor any of this or just respond to questions that you have. That's it.
Well, Jessie, your presentation was amazing. I could relate to everything that you discussed. Prior to coming to the chamber, I used to talk people and have to sell people into coming and moving into nursing homes and assisted living and independent living. And sometimes I'd get sent to a new building and I didn't have enough stories. I didn't know the culture of the building. I didn't have enough. And as I was there, I got better. You know, within 3 weeks, I had enough stories and enough personal to tell. And then it was much easier to make the sale. I could make connections. I could help them to see how their mother would benefit from being here, how they would benefit from being here, because I could figure out what they needed and then connect them in the right way. So everything that you've said is just so amazing and so great. And I really appreciate that we have it all in 1 hour, all tied together where people can gain all this information from you. And you're a great resource right here in Northern Colorado. So I hope people do reach out to you and use your service, because you definitely have it all figured out. So thank you so much. We also thank Plant Moran for their sponsorship of our Tuesday Talent Series, and appreciate Jessie today. We don't have another series for a couple of weeks. We take off because of spring break. So our next one is March 26th, how to communicate like a human being in the age of AI, which I think will be super interesting as well. So I appreciate everyone being here today, and we look forward to our next Tuesday Talent Series. And thank you so much, Jessie.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I think I stopped recording. So yay, awesome.